And then you and I, we got together at the lunch,
right.
Which I ended up paying for, right? Remember that?
Okay, I think it was worth it in the long run.
Definitely.
Well, remember we were with that guy from Hemdale, and he didn't bring any money.
Exactly.
And I didn't bring any money because I was broke.
And as usual, had thousands and thousands of dollars in cash in my pocket.
I think you just pulled out a big canvas bag
Pulled it
and
all
plopped
out,
it on the table.
That's right. That was it.
And as it turns out, in the interim, Arnold didn't want to play Reese at all. Arnold read the script and said, well, I want to play this Terminator guy. And so Jim went from just about ready to pick a fight with him to, that's a good idea.
Well, what I did was I raced out of there, shot back to Hemdale, and talked to the producer and you know, to John Daly at Hemdale, and I said, I think Arnold should play the Terminator. And they all looked at me like I was crazy. But John Daly got on the phone and talked to your agent.
Exactly.
And said, and I remember the conversation very clearly. He's like trying to figure out how to play it, you know, and he's kind of, well, yes, I know, Lou, but he is the title character after all, and yes, I know he's a villain, yes, I know, it's true, he is the bad guy, but it's the title character after all, Lou.
That's
and
right.
And you know, the deal was made that afternoon.
The way the Terminator was initially written, you know, 5'10", 6 feet tall, nondescript, and the whole idea was that he was supposed to be, invisible in plain sight. It can be argued that a 6'3", 220-pound ripped Austrian guy is not your best under-the-radar infiltration unit, but you know what? It's Los Angeles.
It created the idea of this unstoppable Terminator, and you didn't need to believe initially that there was metal under that body. The body was enough to convince people that he was lethal. It really didn't hurt the credibility of the Terminator, which was great. We weren't sure at the beginning whether going in that direction would be successful, and as it turned out, it was really the right choice.
And it really helped with getting the film made, because we were really stalled out on casting. Nobody could really visualize it, and that made a big difference.
Arnold was cast first. With Arnold, we essentially had a go picture. And then we could concentrate on filling the other parts with the best people for the roles and not necessarily star names. Michael Biehn, when he came to audition, had just finished playing Saint Sebastian in a film, and he was much more internal and much less of the kind of action icon that you would expect for someone auditioning for the role of Reese, who is the action hero in the picture.
And I had just come from an audition of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof down at the Mark Taper, and it was a Jose Quintero production. It was a big deal, so I'd worked real hard on the character and the accent and so on and so forth. And I went down there and I spent about, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours auditioning for Jose Quintero for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and didn't get that role. But when I showed up for the Terminator audition and the Kyle audition, I guess I still had some of that southern accent going.
It was not the audition that you would have thought we would respond to.
So I did the reading, I went back, and the feedback from my agent was that they liked me a lot. They thought I was right for the role, but they thought I was too regional. They didn't want to cast somebody that was southern. And myself and my agents were like, well, what are you talking about? You know, I'm not southern, I'm from Nebraska, you know, that's middle America, you know. See me again, that was, you know, I kind of realized what had happened, and so they saw me again.
There was something very vulnerable about him, and that was incredibly important, that he not only be an action star, but he have the vulnerability. And that's why we went with Michael, because he ultimately combined those two skills, the skill to be incredibly physical and believable in that part, as well as the emotional connection that he had with Sarah.
The thing that's interesting about that character is that all the exposition in the piece, who the Terminator was, where he came from, what happened in the past, what's going to happen in the future, who she was, who I was, who the Terminator was, I had to tell that story. Reese told the story from beginning to end about what's happening, because he's the only person who knew. Well, that's exposition, and that usually is a showstopper. That usually stops movies dead in their tracks. But what Jim did, and the brilliance, I think, of the Terminator, is that story was told on the move. It was always told while car chases were going on, while we were running, while we were hiding, while we were being shot at. I was telling the story. You know, the Terminator's this, he's that, you know, and we're screeching around corners. So he mixed the action and the exposition, and it made it much easier for me to not become boring by, you know, sitting around telling the story. Like I said, it was a great character because it had the sensitivity of a guy who didn't know anything about this world he was in. He just knew he had to save this woman that he was in love with.
When we met Linda, she also had the ability to transcend the genre and not be someone who simply screams really well, but someone who was believable as the girl next door who could ultimately become the mother who saves humanity. And that's not an easy transition.
She's a woman that grew and transformed on screen, and that's always a wonderful thing to get to play. You know, a challenge. And she's not someone that starts here and ends there. She went from a vulnerable, normal kind of a girl to someone who found all of her deep reservoirs of strength and came through, and that was good.
We had a great working relationship. We both worked extremely hard on it. I think it was more difficult for her because a lot of that stuff was very, very grueling, running and, you know, jumping and fighting, but she was game and she was good. I think Jim played off that a little bit. I think she got, you know, there were times that she got, you know, frustrated, tired, angry, and dirty, pissed off, and I think it absolutely worked for the character.
One of the other essential people that we were told we had to get in order for the film to be green-lit was someone who ultimately didn't work on the movie at all. We were told we had to get Dick Smith, who was the character makeup star at the time, and he was the one who agreed to talk with us, read the script, and then said, you know, I'm not the right guy for this. The right guy for this is Stan Winston. And he went to bat for Stan, as well as for the movie, to make sure that Stan was approved to come on board to head up the special effects.
And I was very haughty because I was the guy, and I saw this painting that he had done of the endoskeleton. And I went, oh my God, this guy's awesome. And then I read the script. And suddenly I went from a guy who was sitting on a high horse to a guy who really wanted to work on this film.
With Fantasy 2, they also came on board early enough on that they could contribute tremendously to how we planned to bring each effect to the screen.
I read that script in like 45 minutes, and I think, fast as I've ever read a script. It just went right through, and I put it down on Leslie's desk and said, this is great. This is going to be a great movie if this is the script. We got to get this movie.
I was called into the office of Gene Warren Jr. and Fantasy 2 Film Effects of Burbank to do the miniature pyrotechniques. And there on his desk were the storyboards and a lot of paintings of this new film called The Terminator. And when I saw these things, I just flipped out because I thought to myself, well, this is as close as one of my favorite movies as I'm going to come, and that's The War of the Worlds. I thought, well, here's a possibility of creating effects like War of the Worlds for the apocalyptic vision of Jim Cameron.
Jim wanted to use those techniques of, you know, hanging wires on models, doing a lot of high-speed photography, in-camera effects particularly.
I think Jim went to Gene because he knew his reputation of putting it all in camera and the cost-saving aspects of that.
So basically Fantasy 2 was doing the special visual effects. Stan Winston was doing the Terminator makeups, prosthetics, and so forth, heads, puppets.
They were able to use the storyboards to say, okay, we're going to do this live on the set, we're going to do this following frame through stop-motion animation, and that's part of the reason why the shots are so seamless regardless of the technique that we used. Initially, we were supposed to film in the summer of 1983, and we were going to film in Toronto, Canada. Unfortunately, Dino De Laurentiis decided to preempt Arnold to star in the sequel to Conan the Barbarian.
And Dino wouldn't let you out to do
right.
Terminator first.
Well, because he read the script and he said to himself, wait a minute, they're trying to steal my star away.
Right.
Then he knew it was a great script, and he
Right.
told me that.
And we had to shift our shooting schedule to spring, March 1984 in Los Angeles. Arnold was so essential to making this film that everyone was willing and quite happy to put the film on hold until March. If it had been another cast person who wasn't as essential to the identity of the film, I don't think we would have waited.
So I kind of had about 8 months or 10 months knowing that I had the role, but not really being able to get started on it. Which for an actor is like, it's good in one sense because you got plenty of time to work on it, but the other sense is like, well, do I really have it? I mean, who are these people? Jim Cameron, you know, I mean, is his word good? Jim and I used to work a lot and spend a lot of time together, talk about the character and where he came from, and we'd drive around, shoot guns, and have fun. And he'd show me how to hotwire a car, and he set me up with a guy to, you know, to learn martial arts. I first got involved in martial arts when I started working on that show. So I had a lot of time that I worked on that. I did a lot of research on the Warsaw Ghetto, about all the guys that used to, like, you know, kind of live in the rubble of the Warsaw Ghetto when they're fighting the Germans, and what their lives were like, and how they managed through all those tunnels and hideaways, and how they fought the Germans and stuff.
The one nice thing about having a 9-month delay is that we had a soft prep for those 9 months. We were able to anticipate most of the production problems we encountered. Jim was able to storyboard almost the entire movie himself and created certain panels in color that he could pass out to the department heads so they had a perfect idea of the visuals Jim planned to get on screen.
What a director does is always weigh aesthetic versus monetary. You know, you're always making aesthetic choices and then finding out how much it costs and working within the constraints of the budget and the schedule. Well, a producer does the same thing. It's just a shift of emphasis. With the producer, the monetary outweighs the aesthetic. They'll pay homage to it, but what they really care about is the bottom line. The director, it's the opposite. So you have this kind of dialectic of forces, and that's the way movies are supposed to be made.
On a day-to-day basis, I couldn't worry about how the movie was going to turn out. I had to make sure we got the shots we needed, that the compromises that we had to make during production weren't so great that they compromised the picture as a whole, and that I was an advocate not only for Jim but for the movie.
We did the first Terminator for I think, you know, the cost of your motorhome on the second film. Or your oatmeal budget.
Exactly.
Right before we started shooting, Linda Hamilton broke her ankle.
Before the first Terminator, I broke an ankle and tore ligaments, and that never really has been it's never really been strong since then.
And we were concerned and that she'd be able to actually carry out the performance that was essential. She had to run throughout the movie, and it was mostly Linda, by the way, on a broken ankle that had to be wrapped every day, and we had to completely shift the shooting schedule so that most of the running scenes took place later on. And that always throws a production into disarray when you change the schedule as much as we had to.
You know, we shot downtown LA, the worst parts of LA, at night, during the summer, so it was hot, it was humid, it was dirty, smelly, all those alleys and stuff, it was nasty. But it worked for the movie.
The underground nightclub, disco, we called it tech noir because we felt that if we were going to get any good reviews at all, it might be good to spark critics' interest in the kind of filmmaking that we were doing, that it was, as opposed to film noir, tech noir, the dark side of technology. And that's what we called the nightclub in the film. And we shot it downtown in a place that had been a restaurant. And the great thing about it was that it seemed so realistic that people tried to pay to get in the night after we wrapped. We were so desperate for cash at that point we almost took their money. But better sense got a hold of us, and we declined the paying patrons.
While we were making the Terminator, summer of 1984, that we had this medfly scare in Los Angeles, and so they started spraying Los Angeles, and they would spray, you know, the San Fernando Valley one day, and Pomona the next day, and it seemed like our locations somehow ended up matching their spraying areas. Instead of getting sprayed once, we got sprayed like 5 times, you know, because they would move to an area, and that's where we'd be shooting that day. They'd move to another area, and that's where we'd be shooting that day. So we got sprayed on a lot.
You remember how we did the punch through the window with that steel fist? and we couldn't, and the whole rig was too heavy to move.
Right.
So instead of moving the car is sitting still, and we moved the brick wall behind the car on.
That's right. Yeah, we moved the brick wall, but I mean.
And you were strapped into this thing with like a fake arm, and your real arm was behind you.
Yeah, the arm was behind, and then the machine arm was right next to me, and so it was shooting from the side. It made it look like it's my arm and all this. It was terrific stuff, but I just remember talking about that alley that we shot those scenes in. I've never done more running than that night. Remember how many times we had to run with the camera really low, running down that alley with this hideous leather boots on, this heavy leather boots on, and then jump up that car and all this. So the stunts were really severe, and it was really tough, especially with all this stuff on it, with the leather jacket and all that, and then the squirts going off and the explosions and all this stuff. But again, I think that the more you as an actor participate in the stunts, the better it's going to work out there, because the more believable it is.
I'll tell you that the most physical thing that I saw happen on that movie was me entering the Earth, which was me coming through time. And they shot that with a stunt guy, and they put 2 ladders up about 5 or 6 feet, and they laid a 2x4 across the top, and he laid on top of it, and they put a camera down low, and he basically just scooched off the ladder and landed. Shoulder, hip, knees. And from 5 feet up, if you think about cement, it does not give. We were behind the camera cars. We hooked up those camera cars, and looking back on it, man, we were driving fast. Those camera cars were pulling us fast, and we were sliding around corners and stuff. And I remember once driving, and I'm screaming at Linda, and we're ripping around corners, and you know, that tension. I mean, I have a hold of the wheel, and I'm screaming, "The Terminator," you know, whatever, and we're ripping, and he's rolling film, and I'm right in the middle of my speech, and I pull back, and I pulled the steering wheel right off the steering stem, you know, and I'm like, "Here, you drive," you know. We had a lot of fun doing it.
Arnold was tremendous to work with, because you can't get Arnold down. Arnold is always up. And regardless of how difficult a day we were having, Arnold would play a practical joke or say something that would make us all laugh uproariously. And that keeps the morale on the set really high.
He's one of the most professional people I've ever worked with. He has incredible concentration. He takes physical direction like no actor I've ever worked with. He really understands the idea of how to move and how to work with the camera.
He believed completely and unwaveringly in this project.
I get asked about Arnold all the time, of course. Arnold and I rarely, if ever, worked together. Now, I saw him around. He was doing his thing and I was doing my thing. We never worked together. We never did a scene together. That was the only time we were ever on frame together. I mean, we were always running away from him. If he had caught up with us and I was doing a scene with him, we would have had no movie, you know? By the time I got into the same frame as the Terminator, he was no longer Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was a special effect, and he was Stan Winston's wizardry.
Jim wanted to see some other variations, because he's also an artist who wants, you know, choices. He's a brilliant artist, but he wanted choices. And we went through some variations. Some artistic variations, some sculptures of different possibilities for the look of the endoskeleton, and we ended up going right back to the initial concept that Jim had in the painting. He did some sketches himself, and we started doing detail work, and actually Jim became probably the most important artist in my studio. And it was me constantly being able to go, "Jim, I honestly, but why don't you give me a little sketch here?" And sort of milk out the sketches from Jim Cameron. Go, "Okay, fine, we'll work on that." And then I could go over to the guys and say, "We're done, we got it. Let's just, here's the body cavity, and here are the hips, and here's the shoulder." And by the time all was said and done, Jim had detailed in sketch every detail of the endoskeleton, and thank God for him. And then I ended up taking credit for it all, which I will continue to do.
When we initially met with Stan, we felt that it might not be possible to get away with as much during principal photography as we ultimately were able to capture on film at that time.
the concept of creating a full-size endo, I literally had to talk Jim into. He planned on most of all of the endoskeleton work being done in stop-motion animation.
Yeah, he was torn about how much should be done which way. He wanted it to look as real as he could, and so he always struggled with how he was going to get what he wanted, given the time and money we had on this project. I think he originally probably thought it was going to be more in stop motion.
Jim, I really think that we can create the endo full size and get a lot of performance out of the real thing, doing it with puppetry and animatronics. And Jim went for it, knowing also that there would be some things we couldn't do that he would have to rely on stop motion animation for.
And with Stan's ability to see the movie from beginning to end and to mind meld with Jim in terms of the storyboards for each sequence, we realized that we could actually do a lot during production, but we had to be able to know in advance what those sequences would entail.
I knew that we could get some walking and some movement by creating an upper torso puppet of the Terminator that would be carried on the shoulders of a puppeteer, which is one of the techniques we used. Shane Mahan was the Terminator puppeteer who carried the upper torso Terminator, affected his walk and his limp and his dragging leg, and everything that he did generated to that upper torso puppet. Then we added our animatronic techniques to head and eye movement, which was developed by Sonny Berman and Bob Williams. That was the upper torso puppet. We also built a full standing endoskeleton that Jim could shoot from head to toe, and the shots where he's blown in half and he's being dragged along. Again, the upper torso puppet being pulled along from underneath the floor. As far as the rigs we had mechanical insert arms. We developed our first robotic hands, which we would use as inserts and grab the grating and pull them forward. And we also had our exploding dummy endo. It was a urethane endoskeleton that we used to actually blow up, and the reason we had to make it out of urethane and we chromed that urethane was from a safety factor. We didn't want metal pieces, killing all of the people on the set when we blew up this robot. We had insert feet that you would see walking up the stairs, and we made a huge oversized endo eye area that we used for close-ups for the eye operation, and also allowed us to show the eye irising using actually a camera lens for that piece. So those were all the various pieces that we used for the endo. I also knew that ultimately to really sell that there was a robot under there, we would have to duplicate Arnold as a puppet. A couple of sculptures were actually done. We used one of them in the truck at the end when he was driving. The interesting thing is that as good as the heads turned out, the makeup turned out actually better than we thought it would, and I think allowed Jim some more freedom as a filmmaker to shoot, for Arnold to be able to act more, and then a couple of close-up shots just to sell the depth inside that skull, and it works as a storytelling device.
We were lucky that we had both trained under Roger Corman, and Roger taught us some very important lessons, and one of those was that oftentimes films are made in post-production, and we headed into filming knowing that we wouldn't know all of the things that were missing until we'd had an opportunity to cut the film together, and we set aside money for that photography. We were doubly blessed in that Lindsley Parsons, who was the head of the LA branch of Film Finances, a completion bond company, believed in us as well. And when there was a lot of pressure on us to take that money out, because of course no one plans on not getting all the shots that are essential in production, no one has the luxury of having additional photography later on, he believed that was the smartest way to approach this film, and he supported us every step of the way.
It was a finite amount of money that we had to make this picture. When Jim needed additional shots in post-production, inserts or whatever, he either went out and shot them, or he hired a very inexpensive DP, or let's say the most DP he could afford for the money out of his own wallet, to shoot these shots. And they would go and have a little guerrilla ragtag team of filmmakers and go shoot the shots, you know. I believe he got Arnold to pitch in, and I mean, everybody was committed to making this picture work. And that's what it was about.